Laker Nation, what up? Before we get started on today's show, looking at a potential Kyle Kuzma trade and could Derrick Rose be going from New York to Los Angeles, make sure you are subscribed to the Lakers Report by Chat Sports. We are 22 subs away from 36,000 subscribers. This is your offseason hub for everything Lakers, so go to youtube.com/LakersTV or hit that big red button down below. What's the deal with Kyle Kuzma? That's a monster question that the Lakers have to address this offseason as they try to build their roster for the better around LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Is Kyle Kuzma going to get traded? It could happen because according to some reports, the front office brass in Los Angeles has become very frustrated with Kyle Kuzma's play as well as his lack of development. And that development is at a standstill right now. It wasn't too long ago when Kyle Kuzma was the leading scorer on the Lakers. And I understand that team wasn't great from a win-loss perspective, but you thought this was going to be the next really good young player within this organization. That's why the Lakers signed him for $13 million per. Here's the problem, though. Lakers have to address a lot of roster questions. They're simply not good enough, even though they're 1 year removed from an NBA championship. And they have negative $9 million in cap space, whereas Kyle Kuzma, he's on the books through the 2023-2024 season at $13 million per year. Could the Lakers look to free themselves of that $13 million per year price tag to bring in another player who's more impactful? You look at the numbers for what Kyle Kuzma did this past year, and they weren't terrible when you factor in LeBron James when he was healthy and Anthony Davis and the fact that Kyle Kuzma was getting some offensive shots taken away from him. And the numbers are just okay in the regular season. But I became very concerned with what Kyle Kuzma did in the playoffs because these numbers that we're about to show you right here were abysmal. They were disastrous, and I thought Kyle Kuzma was a flake in the playoffs. 21.5 minutes, 6.3 points per game. He shot a frigid cold 29.2% from the floor and just north of 17% from three-point range. When Anthony Davis went down, guys like Kyle Kuzma and Dennis Schroder had a golden opportunity to step up and really prove themselves as legitimate players on this roster and difference makers. Kyle Kuzma did not take advantage of that opportunity. Here's what an NBA agent had to say to Evan Massey about Kyle Kuzma's status within this organization moving forward. The Lakers have grown frustrated with Kuzma's inconsistency and are going to look at trading him this offseason. Rob Pelinka won't move him for cheap, though, but if he can get packaged to add better talent around LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they will do that. Kuzma will be on the trade block this offseason, and quite a few teams are expected to show interest. This is something to monitor as we move forward in the NBA offseason because teams are definitely going to be concerned at the lack of production as well as the lack of development for Kyle Kuzma. This is what pops in my mind, though. I just think that Kyle Kuzma's confidence is shot. Anthony Davis, LeBron James are in the spotlight, and Kuzma just hasn't been the same player the last 2 years. Now, a lot of that is because he doesn't have a lot of volume in terms of shots offensively, but I think his confidence is just shot being in one of the largest media markets and one of the most pressure-packed organizations in the league. I just think that because he's paid $13 million, his production has dipped, it would be best for the Lakers to move on from him and for Kyle Kuzma to leave the Lakers. So do you think Kyle Kuzma is worth that aforementioned $13 million per year salary? Let me know what you're thinking about Kyle Kuzma's price tag here. Type Y for yes, Chase, he's worth $13 million. Type N for no. Get your votes in the comment section down below. Derrick Rose was one of the best stories across the entire NBA this past season because he was able to revive his career in miraculous fashion with the New York Knicks. Who could have predicted that in the first round of the NBA playoffs, Derrick Rose would be the go-to option for the Knicks late in games offensively? Now, of course, that speaks to some of the ineptitude in terms of offensive skill players on the Knicks roster, but it also is a compliment to Derrick Rose for how he's been able to bounce back after all of the knee injuries that he suffered early in his career, and at the tail end of his stint with the Chicago Bulls, it looked as though he was shot. But because he was able to revive his career this past year, Derrick Rose, who's going to be an NBA free agent, is going to demand a lot of money on the open market, and there are going to be teams who are interested in his services because if he is a bench player on a contender, he can really fill it up because that's what he was able to do in 2020, 2021. Derrick Rose put up really solid numbers. And one of the things that stood out to me was his ability to kind of reinvent himself after being that Russell Westbrook type player before Russell Westbrook was in the NBA. Because that's what Derrick Rose was. He was a human highlight reel. His athleticism was exhilarating. He was a guy who could yam a dunk on anybody, but the injuries really cost him a lot of bounce and explosiveness. But you saw some of that bounce, explosiveness, and athleticism return this past season, and the numbers were really solid. 14.5 points per game, little north of 4 assists. He shot 47% from the floor, and going back to how he's reinvented himself, early in his career with the Bulls when he won an MVP in the late 2000s, he wasn't a three-point shooter. This past year, shot nearly 40% from three. So if he can continue to do that and shoot at that clip from distance, there are going to be contenders who are going to be willing to offer him, let's say, between $10 to $15 million. Here's what an NBA executive had to say to NBA Analysis Network about Derrick Rose and maybe the possibility of him teaming up with LeBron James and Anthony Davis and going from New York to Los Angeles. The Knicks would absolutely love to bring Derrick Rose back for another year or two. He was a perfect fit, and Tom Thibodeau would like to keep him on the roster. However, there will be plenty of other suitors, including your Los Angeles Lakers, who will be looking for a new point guard with Dennis Schroder leaving town. LA is a serious threat to land Derrick Rose. Laker Nation, who would you rather have on this roster? Dennis Schroder, who turned down a 4-year, $84 million contract extension, or Derrick Rose, who you could probably get between $10 to $12 million? Dennis Schroder, like Kyle Kuzma, didn't play all that well in the NBA playoffs, and I don't think he's worth around $20 million a year. Yes, he's in his mid to late 20s. He is a much younger option than Derrick Rose. But I think Derrick Rose could help you in the immediacy of the moment next year when you're ready to compete for a title when LeBron and AD are back. Take a look at what Derrick Rose did this year and why I've just been so impressed with him and just the awesome story that is D. Rose. I mean, what a story for him coming back from all those injuries, as I mentioned. He looked great at 32 years old because that explosiveness certainly returned, and I thought he was a legitimate go-to option for the Knicks late in games offensively. I talk about him evolving. The three-point shot, a reason for that because he's been able to extend his game a little bit. And if the Lakers were to bring him in, this is a guy who's really experienced and has played in a bevy of big-time games as well as NBA playoff games throughout his career. And I certainly think that D. Rose has some gas left. So where do you think Derrick Rose should go? Put yourself in his shoes. Type LAL for the Los Angeles Lakers. I think that's the better title option for next season. Type NYK for the New York Knicks, who, hey, Tom Thibodeau really likes them. They have familiarity there. And why fix it? Or why fix it if it ain't broken? Type NYK for the New York Knicks. Let me know what you're thinking on where Derrick Rose should go this offseason.